Okay, so we're talking about Daoism and Confucianism today. We're really going to be talking mostly about Confucianism, and that's what you're going to be most responsible for in terms of assessment. So, look, Confucianism kind of has had a lot of interactions with Taoism, and Taoism was an older, more eclectic religion. Um, but when Confucius came along, it was at this time, historically speaking, at the sort of disintegration of feudalism as a social and political system in China. And what that meant essentially was a lot of social upheaval and disruption. And Confucius arose in that mix, sort of offering a view on which a view kind of arising out of concern for social cohesion and individual virtue. Um, Now, so that was sort of the context in which it arose. As we'll talk about later in the lecture, it's not totally clear whether Confucianism should even count as a religion. It actually kind of gets hard to even talk about what constitutes a religion at this point. Um, Buddhism is usually taken to be a religion, but it doesn't have a lot of the markings or a lot of the features that religion often has. So it doesn't necessarily, in many instantiations, doesn't involve the worship of a god, as we saw. There's no, in some instantiations, there's no talk of metaphysics. In fact, we talked about how lots of kinds of Buddhism, especially like Theravada Buddhism and the forms of Buddhism that more closely follow Buddha's own teachings, really kind of disavow the sort of speculative aspect of religion, of trying to figure out the way the world works, the way reality is, what happens in the afterlife, what happened before people came around, and really just focuses on the practical. And so, and there, it actually disavows a lot of ritual, right, which is common to most other religions. So you lose out on all these aspects of, or more normal aspects of religion, but it's still called a religion. And Confucianism is sort of the same way. It lacks a lot, or in some instantiations, it lacks, at least historically, it has lacked a lot of the signs and features of that we associate with religion. Um, and it just, we probably shouldn't play at semantics too long about whether it counts. We're still going to study it. So let me start by saying Confucianism has kind of historically put a huge emphasis on education. And it's really interesting to look at why that is. As sort of a teaser, Confucius thought that education was so important because civilization was very fragile, essentially. And he thought that education and civilization were kind of very important for the formation of people, that we weren't, he doesn't think we were naturally evil, but people are not such that they can come to virtue and excellence and social harmony without guidance of culture and education. So to sort of give you a little glimpse into what he means by that, I want to quote from this book by an anthropologist named Joseph Henrich. And the Henrich's thesis in this book is that this common adage that is false. The common adage being that humans are so special and so dominant because of our raw intelligence, essentially, and our ability to kind of think through novel problems and creatively problem solve because of that raw intelligence. And his thesis is that instead, the distinctive strength of humanity is is culture. So it's not actually the raw intelligence of individual humans that makes us so dominant. It is culture. Culture is something that we distinctively have, and that enables humanity to do all the things that we do. So here's a story that he tells. He's talking about how Eskimos or Inuits hunt whales. So I'll just read it out to you. I think this is just totally fascinating. You first have to find their breathing holes in the ice. It's important that the area around the hole be snow covered. Otherwise, the seals will hear you and vanish. Oh, this is about seals. Sorry, not whales. That's a typo. Um, Otherwise, the seals will hear you and vanish. You then open the hole, smell it to verify it's still in use. What do seals smell like? And then assess the shape of the hole using a special curved piece of caribou antler. The hole is then covered with snow, save for a small gap at the top that is capped with a down indicator. That would be a feather indicator. If the seal enters the hole, the indicator moves, and you must blindly plunge your harpoon into the hole using all your weight. Your harpoon should be about 1.5 meters or 5 feet long, with a detachable tip that is tethered with a heavy braid of sinew line. You can get the antler from the previously noted caribou, which you brought down with your driftwood bow. The rear spike of the harpoon is made of an extra hard polar bear bone. Yes, you also need to know how to kill polar bears. It's best to catch them napping in their dens. Once you've plunged your harpoon's head into the seal, you're then in a wrestling match as you reel him in onto the ice where you can finish him off with the aforementioned bare bone spike. Now you have a seal, but you have to cook it. However, there are no trees at this latitude for wood, and driftwood is too sparse and valuable to use routinely for fires. To have a reliable fire, you'll need to carve a lamp from soapstone. You know what soapstone looks like, right? Render some oil for the lamp from blubber, and make a wick out of a particular species of moss. You'll also need water. The pack ice is frozen salt water, so using it for drinking will just make you dehydrate faster. However, old sea ice has lost most of its salt, so it can be melted to make potable water. Of course, you need to be able to locate and identify old sea ice by color and texture. To melt it, make sure you have enough oil for your soapstone lamp. So Henrik's whole point here is that if you took the smartest, most generally trained survival expert and take Bear Grylls and drop him into this environment, and he would not be able to do this. Because I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. Because the point of that excerpt was no one person thinking through this on their own would be able to figure all of this out just by thinking it through, no matter how much time they had. It is only through the slow development over probably hundreds, maybe thousands of years of the culture around this thing, seal hunting, that they've slowly been able to figure it out. Don't ask me how they figured it out when it takes more than a lifetime, how they did it without dying, but they somehow did. And there's also the implication in that passage that some of these tools and some of these methods, you actually have, in order to use it for the purpose you're using it for, like hunting seals, you have to have already hunted seals, because you have to have like the blubber to burn the fire to cook the seal, but that means you've already killed a seal. So what the passage is pointing out is that the culture is vitally important to accomplishing this feat, and this is going to be true just generally speaking. Think about, for example, all of the sort of cultural infrastructure we have around building houses. So you very probably cannot go out and build your house. You also can't go out and fix your car. You also can't fix your TV or build a TV. You can't do anything without electricity, and you can't really control that. So really, we survive by the sort of cultural inventions passed down and built upon over time, and not by raw intelligence or power or ingenuity at a personal level. So this is sort of a sneak peek into part of the reason why Confucius thought that education and preserving culture was so important. Right? He did not think that we could be excellent or really excel or even be virtuous without it. And it's a very tenuous thing. Once that cultural knowledge and institutional knowledge is lost, it's lost. So it needs to be passed down and closely guarded. So there was a very strong emphasis in Confucianism on education for that reason. Now, Taoists differed in this respect. This is not on the slide, but Taoists were very much about kind of conforming to nature. So they did not want any sort of artificial formation in humanity. They need and we'll get to this a little bit later. They thought of humanity as more naturally good, more naturally knowledgeable, as long as you kind of let yourself be formed by nature. And if that's the case, then they thought of formal education as being an artificial kind of disformation or deformation of a human being. And so they were not in favor of formal education. Okay, I'm going to stop here just to break up the recording.